Can you hear me okay? Okay. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له أشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله خير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. Okay, in the last lesson that we had on this commentary upon Sūrat al-Fātiḥah, we looked at how the surah contains the three actions of the heart, which is love, or which are love, fear and hope, and that these three are contained within the first three verses of the surah. And the last lesson specifically we looked at Muhabba, and the Shaykh al-Islām Muḥammad bin al-Wahhāb, he explained that this Muhabba is of four types, and we looked at each of these four types, and the Shaykh Ṣāliḥ al-Fawzān, he commented and explained each of these types. So from them was the Muhabba or the love which is shirkiyah, that which entails shirk. And the second was the Muhabba which is loving falsehood and hating the truth. And this was a characteristic of the munafiqeen, or the hypocrites. The first is a characteristic of the mushrikeen. The second is a characteristic of the munafiqeen. The third one is a muhabba tabi'iyyah, which is a natural type of love. And the Shaykh said that this is like when a person loves wealth, loves his offspring, and things like this. And he said this is permissible so long as it does not busy a person away from obedience to Allah and doesn't aid him in falling into that which is haram. Otherwise, it is permissible. And the fourth, muhabba, which is loving the people of Tawḥīd and hating the people of shirk, and this is the strongest handhold of iman. And the Shaykh Ṣāliḥ al-Fawzān, he commented upon each of these, and that's where we finished the last lesson. So to continue, Shaykh al-Islām Muḥammad bin Abdul Wahhāb, he then says that the second verse, al-ayatu thaniya, fiha ar-Rajā, that the second verse contains hope. It contains hope. And this second verse is ar-Raḥmān ar-Raḥīm. The second verse in Sūrat al-Fātiḥah is ar-Raḥmān ar-Raḥīm. So the Shaykh says here, Shaykh Ṣāliḥ al-Fawzān, he says that within this ayah is ar-Rajā, hope, meaning a hope for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because since Allah has named himself here with ar-Raḥmān and ar-Raḥīm, that he's one who is Raḥmān, one who is full of mercy, overflowing with mercy, and Raḥīm, the one who shows mercy to his servants, then since Allah is described with these names, then a person, his mercy is to be hoped for. And hence, this ayah therefore indicates Rajā, hope. Then Shaykh al-Islām Muḥammad bin Abdul Wahhāb said after this, وَالْآيَةُ الثَّالِثَةُ, the third ayah, fiha al-khawf. The third ayah contains khawf, fear. What is the third ayah? The third ayah is Mālik Yawm, as Shaykh Ṣāliḥ al-Fawzān now comments. He says that the third ayah is the saying of Allah the Most High, Mālik Yawm. So here, this ayah, in which Allah says that He is the Master of the Day of Judgment, then this contains a takhweef, meaning it contains basically causing people to fear this day. Why? Because this day is the day when people will be convicted by way of their evil actions. The evil actions will convict them, meaning make them guilty. And hence, this is something that should be feared. This ayah therefore contains fear. So the first ayah, so we now have 3 verses. The first verse, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, that contained mahabba. It indicated love. The second ayah indicated ar-Raja', ar-Raḥmān ar-Raḥīm, hoping for the mercy of Allah. And the third ayah, the third verse contains khawf, fear from the punishment of Allah. And this is Mālik Yawm. So these three affairs at the beginning of this surah, in the first 3 verses, that when these 3 affairs or these 3 actions come together, then they constitute the foundation of worship. So these 3 things in the heart, they form the foundation of worship. And as for the person who takes just one of them, meaning he worships Allah just with one of these, then he is astray. He's a person who will be astray. So whoever worshipped Allah with mahabba, with love only, right? So he has love in his heart, but he doesn't fear Allah, and he doesn't fear Allah's punishment, nor does he have hope in Allah's mercy. This person is astray. This person is astray. And this way is the way of the Sufis. This is the way of the Sufis. These people who say that we don't worship Allah just because of the fear of His fire, and nor do we worship Him because of the hope in His mercy, or having hope for His paradise, but rather we only worship Him because we love Him. And that's the only basis of our ibadah. This is misguidance and refuges from Allah. Why? Because the messengers and the angels are the most superior of the creation. And yet, we find that they fear Allah and they place hope in Allah, the angels and the messengers. As Allah says in this ayah, إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا يُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ وَيَدْعُونَنَا رَغَبًا وَرَحَبًا وَكَانُوا لَنَا خَاشِعِينَ. Talking about the messengers, that verily they used to race towards good deeds, and they used to call upon us رَغَبًا وَرَحَبًا, meaning they used to call upon us out of like aspiration, and basically with love and hope, aspiring, and with aspiration, which is hope, and with fear and hope. They used to call upon us out of fear and hope, and they used to be humble to us. They used to be humble to us. Sūrat al-Anbiya, surah number 21, verse 90. So the messengers, therefore, they used to fear Allah, they used to fear Him, and they used to place hope in Him. And likewise, Allah says concerning the angels, He says, أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ يَبْتَغُونَ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهُمُ الْوَسِيلَةَ أَيُّهُمْ أَقْرَبُ وَيَرْجُونَ رَحْمَتَهُ وَيَخَافُونَ عَذَابَهُ. Sorry, this is in reference not to the angels, but this is in reference to, or as occurs in the books of tafsir, that this is in reference to Uzair, al-Uzair, who the Jews used to worship, and Isa alayhi salam, and his mother alayhi salam. So Uzair, Isa, and Isa ibn Maryam, and Maryam alayhi salam. And these were worshipped, all of them were worshipped by the mushrikun. They themselves are just merely servants. They're just servants of Allah. And they themselves, as occurs in this verse, the meaning of this verse is that those upon whom they call themselves seek a means of nearness to Allah, to see which of them is closer. And they hope in His mercy, and they fear His punishment. They hope in His mercy, and they fear His punishment. So therefore, the servants of Allah, they hope in Allah's mercy and they fear His punishment. So how can they themselves be worshipped alongside Allah? If they themselves have fear of Allah and they hope in Allah, they have the khawf and they have this raja, how can they themselves be made an object of worship alongside Allah? So this is the person who worships Allah out of love only. He's astray, he's misguided. And we see that even the angels and even the messengers, they used to fear Allah and they used to place hope in Allah. Then the Shaykh says, whoever worshipped Allah with hope only, then he is from amongst the Murji'ah. he is from amongst the Murji'ah, those people who expel actions from Iman. Those people who expel actions out of Iman, and they just merely hope, they just merely depend upon hope. Right? So they don't fear from sins and disobedience, and all they have is hope in the hearts, hope for forgiveness. And they say that Iman, faith, is just something which involves the affirmation of the heart. Or they might say that faith is just something which is an affirmation of the heart and speech with the tongue. Right? So you believe in your heart and you express this belief upon your tongue. And that is faith. That is what faith is. And they say that the actions are just things which kind of perfect a person's Iman. It's not essential for Iman, but it adds perfection to a person's Iman. But it doesn't, actions don't come into the root or the foundation of Iman. Rather, actions, when you do actions, it just adds perfection to your Iman, to your faith. And the Shaykh says this is misguidance. This is misguidance and refuge is from Allah. Why? Because Iman, faith, consists of three things: belief, speech and action. Belief, speech and action. And one of them isn't sufficient. One of these things on its own is not sufficient. Two of these things on their own are not sufficient. Rather, it's vital that all of them are present. So speech alone is not accepted, action alone is not accepted, belief alone is not accepted. Rather, these three things are required so that Iman is fulfilled, it's actualized. As for the third, the one who worships Allah out of khawf, fear only, the one who worships Allah out of fear only, then this person is upon the way of the Khawarij. This person is upon the way of the Khawarij. Those who worship Allah only out of fear. They worship Allah only out of fear. So what they do is that they look at in the Quran, and they only take the texts in which there is a threat of punishment. And they leave the texts which contain promise, a promise and a forgiveness and mercy. So they go to the texts in which there are threats, threats of certain actions, threats for sins, threats for disobedience, and they just adhere to these texts. So to them, when a person falls into a sin, he has now fallen under a threat, and so therefore he cannot be forgiven. Right? So this is the way of the people who worship Allah out of fear only, that they only look at the threats which Allah has made, and they don't look at the promises and the forgiveness and the reward and the mercy, those verses which contain Allah's mercy. So therefore, we find that people who worship Allah out of love alone, or fear alone, or hope alone, then they represent three sects from amongst the sects of, which appeared, and they are the Sufiya, the Sufis who worship Allah out of love alone, and they are similar to the Christians in that regard. Those Christians who just worship Allah out of love alone, and they worship Him blindly. And then we have the Murji'ah, those who worship Allah out of hope only. So all they have is they just hope that they will be forgiven. They don't fear Allah, they don't refrain from disobedience, they don't act, they don't fulfill their obligations. So they just think that their belief in the heart and their statement on the tongue in itself will save them. And the other Murji'ah, who just depend upon hope. And the Khawarij, the third group, who worship Allah out of fear only, who have an exaggeration in this fear. As for the people of the truth, as for the way of the truth, then it is one which combines between all of these affairs. One which combines between love and fear and hope, and this is what is Iman. This is Iman, this is faith. And this is the path of the believers. And this is Tawḥīd. This is also Tawḥīd, singling out Allah with all forms of worship. Okay, now this discussion that we've had of love, fear and hope, then these three verses bring all of these issues together. Like these issues that we've discussed in this lesson so far and in the previous lesson. These three verses, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, ar-Raḥmān ar-Raḥīm, Mālik Yawm, it brings together all of these issues. Love, fear and hope. Okay, next, Shaykh al-Islām Muḥammad bin Abdul Wahhāb, he then went on to the next part of the surah, in which is now the fourth verse, in which we say, Iyyāka na'bud, Iyyāka na'bud. Then he continues, Shaykh al-Islām Muḥammad bin Abdul Wahhāb, and he says, meaning that I worship you, O my Lord, with whatever has already preceded of these three things. أي أعبدك يا رب بما مدى بهذه الثلاث بمحبتك ورجائك وخوفك. Meaning, so when we say إياك نعبد, what are we saying? Shaykh al-Islam says, meaning that I worship you, O my Lord, with what has just preceded. Meaning, these three things. With loving you, and with placing hope in you, and with fearing you. Right, so Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, indication of mahabba. Ar-Raḥmān ar-Raḥīm, indication of raja. Mālik Yawm, indication of khawf. Then we say, Iyyāka na'bud. You alone do I worship. But meaning what? You alone do I worship with these three things which have just been mentioned, or which have been indicated, with mahabba, with khawf, and with raja. So commenting upon this, Shaykh Ṣāliḥ al-Fawzān, he just says, Iyyāka na'bud, meaning that we worship you with these three, al-mahabba, al-khawf, and al-raja. Why? Because worship cannot be fulfilled, worship cannot be actualized or fulfilled except with these three together. Then Shaykh al-Islam Muḥammad bin Abdul Wahhāb, he continues and he says, فَهَذِهِ الثَّلَاث أَرْكَانُ الْإِبَادَةِ, that these three things are the pillars of worship. These three affairs are the pillars of worship, love, fear and hope. And whoever directs them to other than Allah, or to direct them to other than Allah, is shirk. To direct them to other than Allah is shirk. And Shaykh al-Islam and Shaykh Ṣāliḥ al-Fawzān, he comments upon this and he says that therefore this means that anyone who loves other than Allah, with a love that's only due to Allah, then he's a mushrik. And whoever hopes in other than Allah, whoever hopes in something which only Allah can give, then he is a mushrik. And whoever fears something or someone other than Allah, in which only Allah has power over, then he is a mushrik. And then Shaykh al-Islam Muḥammad bin Abdul Wahhāb says, وَفِي هَذِهِ الثَّلَاث الرَّدُّ عَلَى مَنْ تَأَلَّكَ بِوَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُنَّ كَمَنْ تَأَلَّكَ بِالْمَحَبَّةِ وَحْدَهَا. That in these three verses is a refutation of whoever attached himself to just one of these things, such as the one who is attached to love only. So therefore, those who are attached to love only, we know that this is in reference to the Sufiyah. And then he says, أَوْ تَأَلَّكَ بِالرَّجَاءِ وَحْدَهُ, or the one who attached himself to just hope alone. And we know that they are the murji'ah. أَوْ تَأَلَّكَ بِالْخَوْفِ وَحْدَهُ, or the one who attached himself to fear only. And we know that these are the Khawarij, and those people those who only took the texts which contain a mention of Allah's threat. After this, the Shaykh al-Islam Muḥammad bin Abdul Wahhāb says that whoever directs فَمَنْ صَرَفَ مِنْهَا شَيْئًا لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ فَهُوَ مُشْرِكٌ. So therefore anyone who directs any of these things to other than Allah, then he is a mushrik. Then he continues and he says, he just repeats the same point, that وَفِيهَا مِنَ الْفَوَائِدِ الرَّدُّ عَلَى الطَّوَائِفِ الثَّلَاثِ التي also from the benefits it contains is a refutation upon the three groupings, all of whom just take a single one, single one of these three, such as the one who worshipped Allah out of mahabba only, or the one who worshipped Allah out of fear only, like the Murji'ah, or the one who worshipped Allah out of fear only, like the Khawarij. So he just emphasizes that same point that's been made before. Okay, now he moves on to the second half of this verse. Right, so we've discussed Iyyāka na'bud. Iyyāka na'bud means that you alone do we worship, O Lord, with what is already preceded of the three things: love, fear and hope. Then Allah says, Iyyāka na'bud wa iyyāka nasta'īn. Wa iyyāka nasta'īn. So this verse as a whole, it contains Tawḥīd al-Uluhiyyah, Tawḥīd al-Ibadah, Tawḥīd al-Uluhiyyah, and Tawḥīd ar-Rubūbiyyah. It contains two things. This verse as a whole contains two things, two types of Tawḥīd: the Tawḥīd of Uluhiyyah and the Tawḥīd of Rubūbiyyah. Okay, first of all, when we say Iyyāka na'bud, you alone do we worship, this is an indication of Tawḥīd ar-Rubūbiyyah, Tawḥīd al-Uluhiyyah, meaning the Tawḥīd with which Allah is singled out in worship, and Allah's right to be worshipped alone. Iyyāka na'bud. And wa iyyāka nasta'īn, from you alone do we seek aid. This is Tawḥīd ar-Rubūbiyyah. This is Tawḥīd ar-Rubūbiyyah, because we are seeking aid from Allah due to His Lordship. Okay, so concerning Iyyāka na'bud, Shaykh Ṣāliḥ al-Fawzān, he then comments upon this and he says that here this contains Tawḥīd al-Uluhiyyah, which means to single out Allah with the actions of the servants which Allah has legislated for them. إفراد الله بأفعال العباد التي شرعها لهم. It is to single out Allah with those actions that Allah has legislated upon us, those actions of worship, to single out Allah with that. Because uluhiyyah, the meaning of uluhiyyah is al-ibadah. And ibadah itself is from our actions. The ibadah is nothing but the actions which the servants perform. So therefore it means to single out Allah with our actions, those actions which Allah has legislated upon us, which constitute worship. And wa iyyāka nasta'īn, and Shaykh Ṣāliḥ al-Fawzān, he says, this contains Tawḥīd ar-Rubūbiyyah. Why? Because to give aid, al-i'ānah, to give aid and to give this support and help, this is from the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first half, Iyyāka na'bud, is from the actions of the servants, which is ibadah, and so therefore this is Tawḥīd al-Uluhiyyah. And the second half of the verse, wa iyyāka nasta'īn, then that is from the actions of Allah, because Allah is the one who gives aid, who gives help and support. So this is from the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is Tawḥīd ar-Rubūbiyyah, which is to single out. What is Tawḥīd ar-Rubūbiyyah? It is to single out Allah with His actions, meaning Allah is unique and singled out with the actions of creating and providing and giving life and taking life and sustaining and so on and so forth. Right? So we single out Allah with these actions. So this is the fourth verse, Iyyāka na'budu wa iyyāka nasta'īn, containing a mention of the two types of Tawḥīd, and also indicating that we worship Allah with what is already preceded in the first three verses of love, fear and hope. Then Shaykh al-Islām Muḥammad bin al-Wahhāb, he then brought the next ayah, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم, guide us to the straight path, and he says, فيها الرد على المبتدئين, فيها الرد على المبتدئين, that this ayah is a refutation of the innovators. This verse is a refutation of the innovators. Concerning this, Shaykh al-Islam, Shaykh Ṣāliḥ al-Fawzān says, اهدنا الصراط. So the first part of this verse, اهدنا الصراط, guide us. Guide us to the path. So the first part of this verse, اهدنا الصراط, guide us to the path. Then the Shaykh says that guidance is of two types. Guidance, when we look at guidance itself, guidance is of two types. First of all, hidayah, the guidance of showing or indicating. The guidance of dilala and irshad. This is the first type of guidance. And the second type of guidance is the guidance of tawfiq and tasdeed. Okay, so what does this mean? The first type of guidance, so al-hidayah, is of two types. The first type is the guidance of just showing and indicating. What this means is, for example, the Messenger ﷺ, he comes and he shows us what is the path. He shows us what is Tawḥīd. He shows us what is the Sunnah. So the path itself has been made clear to us. Right? We've been directed and shown the right way. That's the first type of guidance. The second type of guidance is the guidance of tawfiq and tasdeed, meaning the guidance of success. And this guidance is from Allah. This is in the hands of Allah, meaning that the person is, even though he knows the path, he's actually guided to the path in his actions, in his beliefs, in his statements, and so on and so forth. Right? So just because a person might know the path, it doesn't mean that he's guided. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's automatically guided. So guidance is of two types. The first guidance, the guidance of irshad and dilala, meaning that the guidance of being shown what the path is. Right? So a person might know Tawheed, he might know Islam, he might know the Sunnah, he might know the truth in these affairs, but that doesn't mean that he's actually upon that path. He just knows it. So this means that this person has now received the first type of guidance. He's received the first type of guidance. As for the second type of guidance, that's in Allah's hands. Allah is the one who guides whom He wills, and He misguides whom He wills. And this is the guidance of tawfiq. And this is something only granted by Allah. And this means that a person is actually guided in his beliefs, in his statements, in his actions, to worshipping Allah alone, and to worshipping Allah upon the way of the Sunnah, and to being upon the truth in all the affairs. This is the guidance of the guidance of Allah, and it's the guidance of tawfiq. Another way to look at it, as the Shaykh explains here, is that the first type of guidance, the guidance of irshad, which is the guidance of being shown the truth, this is common, and this is something which has occurred to all of the creation. This is common between all of the creation, between the believers, between the disbelievers, and the mushrikeen. Why? Because Allah has already indicated to them, has already shown them the path of truth. All of them know the path of truth. The path of truth, by way of the revelation, by way of the Quran, by way of the messenger, by way of sending of the messengers. They all know that. However, we find that these kuffar, they didn't accept the truth, didn't act upon it, they weren't guided to it. Even though they knew it, even though they received one type of guidance, they hadn't received the second type of guidance from Allah, and they didn't accept the truth. And this is why Allah says here, that the Shaykh brings an ayah, وَأَمَّا ثَمُودُ فَهَدَيْنَاهُمْ فَاسْتَحَبُّوا الْعَمَى عَلَى الْهُدَى. As for Thamud, then we guided them, we showed them the guidance, but they loved blindness over guidance. They loved blindness over guidance. Surah Fussilat, Surah number 41, verse 17. So meaning that we guided the meaning that we explained to them. We explained to them. So Allah has indeed guided the whole of creation with this first type of guidance, the guidance of being shown what is the path, being shown what is the truth. And as for the second type, the Shaykh says, an-naw'u thani, the second type of guidance, then this is the guidance of being granted success, meaning Allah granting you success, and you accepting the truth. Then this is something that is unique only to the believers. This type of guidance is unique only to the believers. So therefore, in this ayah, when we ask Allah, when we say ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, then we are asking Allah for both types of guidance. We are asking Allah for both types of guidance. That when we make this dua, ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, we are asking Allah to show us what is the right way. Why? Because as Ibn al-Qayyim explains, that if we take each person one by one, each person will vary to the degree to which he knows the path. Each and every person, each and every Muslim will know the path to different levels, which shows that every Muslim is always in need of guidance and being shown the path. Being taught more from Islam, from the Sunnah, and so on and so forth. And the second type of actually being guided to acting upon that. So the believer, he asks Allah for both types of guidance. Then al-Mustaqim, ihdina sirat al-Mustaqim. Al-Mustaqim, Shaykh Ṣāliḥ al-Fawzān says, meaning that which is, straight. The path which is straight. Meaning straight. As opposed to the path of misguidance. Because that path of misguidance is crooked and bent and deviated and swerved and so on and so forth, and it basically causes the one who goes upon it to be wasted. As for the path of Allah, then that path is straight and clear and manifest, and the person who remains upon it, then he will quickly go towards paradise. And then the Shaykh brings the verse, وَأَنَّ هَذَا صِرَاطِ مُسْتَقِيمًا فَاتَّبِعُوهُ وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا السُّبُلَ فَتَفَرَّقَ بِكُمْ عَنْ سَبِيلِهِ. The well-known verse. Verily, this is my straight path, so follow it, and do not follow the other paths, lest they separate you away from His path. So, therefore, in this ayah, اهْدِنَا الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ, then we are asking Allah that He guides us to this path, this path which leads to Allah and which is straight and which guides to paradise. This is Sūrat al-An'am, Surah number 6, verse 153. Then, after this, Shaykh Ṣāliḥ al-Fawzān, Shaykh al-Islām Muḥammad bin al-Wahhāb, he says, as for the last two verses, then within them are many benefits. The last two verses contain many benefits. They contain a mention of the state of the people, the various states that people can be in. Allah has divided them, Allah the Most High has divided them into three groups. He's divided them into three groups. So he says that these three groups are mun'amun alayhi. The first group is the one upon whom there is Allah's favor, one who has been blessed, one who's been favored. The second category of people is the one upon whom is Allah's anger. And the third type of person here is the one who is astray. So the last two verses, صِرَاطَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. Allah has divided the people in these two verses into three types. One upon whom is His favor, one upon whom is His anger, and one who is astray. So the Shaykh comments, he says that the people are, all the people fall into one of these three. Either he's one whom Allah has favored, either he's one upon whom is Allah's anger, or he's one who's astray. How do they fall into these categories? The Shaykh explains. The one upon whom is Allah's favor is the one who acquired knowledge and they acted upon it. Right, so they acquired knowledge and they acted upon it. As for the ones who are astray, as for the ones who upon whom is anger, then they are the ones who acquired knowledge and they abandoned acting upon it. So they acquired knowledge, but they abandoned acting upon it. And those who are astray are the ones who took to acting, so they begin to act, but they abandoned knowledge, they didn't acquire knowledge. So these three types of people are categorized according to their position with respect to knowledge and action. So we are asking here, so again look in this ayah, look in this passage, how we are asking Allah that He makes us from amongst those who Allah has favored, meaning that He makes us from amongst those who acquire the knowledge and who act upon the knowledge. And we are asking Allah also in this passage that He takes us away from the path of those upon whom is His anger and the path of those who are astray. So look at this connection between all of these affairs. We say, Ihdina Sūrat al-Mustaqīm, we're asking Allah to guide us to the straight path. Then we explain what this path is. Sūrat al-Ladīna an'amta alayhim, the path of those upon whom You have bestowed Your favour, meaning those who acquire knowledge and who act upon it. And then we ask Allah to save us from the two other paths. Sūrat al-Ladīna an'amta alayhim, ghayr al-maghdubi alayhim, meaning the path of those upon whom is Allah's anger, those who acquired knowledge but didn't act upon it, wal ad-dālīn, and those who took to acting but without knowledge. So the Shaykh says that we are asking therefore that Allah makes us from those upon whom is Allah's favour, and that He takes us away from the paths of those who are upon whom there is anger and those who are astray, and that this surah is a mighty surah. This surah, in light of all of this, like these meanings that it contains, these du'as that it contains, this surah is a mighty surah, and for this reason Allah has made it obligatory. Allah has made it obligatory upon us in every single rak'ah, in every single unit of the prayer. Why? Because of the fact that it contains these secrets, these great affairs. Then Shaykh al-Islām Muḥammad bin al-Wahhāb explains, فَالْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ أَهْلُ عِلْمٍ لَيْسَ مَعَهُمْ عَمَلٍ, that those upon whom is Allah's anger are those who are the people of knowledge, who don't have action. They have knowledge but they don't have action. And the Shaykh, and وَالضَّالُونَ أَهْلُ عِبَادَةٍ لَيْسَ مَعَهَا عِلْمٍ, and that those who are astray are the people of worship who don't have knowledge with them. And so the Shaykh Ṣāliḥ al-Fawzān, he comments upon these 2 points, and he says that the first group, al-Maghdubi alayhim, they are the Yahud, and whoever is upon their path from this ummah. So initially this verse is referring to the Yahud, those who know the truth but don't act upon it, but it also includes those people from this ummah who acquire the knowledge, who learn the knowledge, but they don't act upon their knowledge. And the second group, وَالضَّالُونَ, those who are astray, that initially they are the Christians, and from this ummah they are the Sufiyya, al-Mubtadi'ah, al-Mukharrifun, the Sufis and the deviants, those who, all of them who enter into this, the astray people. Why? Because they busy themselves in worship, but they abandon knowledge, and they act upon ignorance. They worship Allah upon ignorance. And they say, at the same time, they say that knowledge just busies you away from acting. In other words, knowledge is a waste of time to them, because knowledge, it just occupies you away from acting. And then the Shaykh al-Islām Muḥammad bin al-Wahhāb, he says that even though the reason, or the sabab al-nuzul, that the reason for revelation of these 2 verses are the Jews and the Christians, even though that this is the initial reason for revelation, then despite that, anyone or everyone who is described with these characteristics, then he falls under these verses. These verses also apply to anyone who is described with these characteristics. So initially, this is in reference to the Jews and the Christians, but anyone, even from this nation, from this Muslim nation, who is described with these characteristics, meaning one who has knowledge but doesn't act, or the one who acts without knowledge, doesn't have knowledge, then he falls under these verses. Al-Maghdubi alayhim, ghayr al-Maghdubi alayhim wal ad-Dālīn. As the Shaykh then says, as the Shaykh Ṣāliḥ al-Fawzān, he then says that al-Maghdubi alayhim was for the Yahud, wal-Dālīn was for the Christians, and so therefore, that when we look at the meaning of this verse, we look at the meaning, the general meaning that the words contain, right? We don't restrict it just to the reason why it was revealed. Even though that initially when these 2 verses were revealed, they were in respect to the Jews and the Christians, but we don't limit the meaning to the reason why it was revealed. Rather, its meaning is generally applicable based upon the meaning which is found in these words. And then the Shaykh finishes by bringing a statement from one of the Salaf, and this statement, it's from Sufyan ibn Uyaynah, I believe, and this statement is an explanation of this verse, of these verses. And in this statement, one of the Salaf said that whoever went corrupt from our scholars, then he has a resemblance to the Jews. He has something in him of resemblance to the Jews. And whoever went corrupt from our worshippers, then he has a resemblance to the Christians. Meaning that the scholar who goes astray, who goes corrupt, then he has a resemblance to the Jews. Why? Because he's a scholar who has knowledge, but he didn't act. And whoever went corrupt from the worshippers, then he has a resemblance to the Christians. Why? Because he resembled them in worshipping Allah out of ignorance. Worshipping, but not turning to knowledge. So this is one of the benefits, and inshallah we'll stop the lesson there. And I think the next section we'll finish off we'll finish off this book with the next lesson, inshallah ta'ala. We'll finish this lesson here. Naam akhi. Jazakallah khairan. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam.
Which person is better? Is it a worshipper or a person of knowledge?
Person of knowledge.
Person of knowledge.
Yeah. As a Prophet, there's many hadith which speak about the virtues of knowledge. Like compared between the person who's like an alim, is like the moon on a clear sky compared to the stars. That's the example of the knowledgeable person. And there are many hadith which are of this nature, which explain the virtues of the alim, of the worshipper. And one of the reasons is because the worshipper, his benefit is only for himself, whereas the benefit of the scholar is for everybody, besides him. So that worshipper when he prays the tahajjud, when he does all these nawafil and so forth, that is only benefiting him, nobody else. But the alim, when he gives lessons, when he teaches the people how to worship Allah, when he encourages them, when he gives a khutbah, when he instills fear in them, when he instills hope in them, and all these other things, when he encourages them to, perform tahajjud and so on and so forth, look at all that benefit. How it's a multiple of the ibadah of just that one person. So therefore, the alim, his status is much higher than the worshipper.
What the guidance of Tawfiq? Does Allah sort of set any sort of criterion as to who He chooses, or is it just a case of if you ask them?
No, obviously Allah guides the one who seeks to be guided. Those who want guidance, Allah will guide them. Those in whose hearts is they don't want guidance, Allah will misguide them. Allah only guides and misguides based upon a person's heart, based upon what's in a person's heart. If a person seeks guidance, wants guidance, and he's sincere, Allah will guide him. If a person is not, really after guidance, and in his heart there is a disease or something else, Allah will misguide that person. So yeah, we ask Allah, we sincerely seek guidance. We make this dua, we ask Allah for guidance, and we don't fall into sins and things like that which would cause us to be misguided. And then, if we do these things, Allah will guide us, inshallah.
With regards to that verse, of Allah misguides, no one can guide.
Yeah.
When Allah misguides, is that because He misguides them because He knows that they're happy with this, or?
Yeah. Allah's guiding and misguiding is based upon His wisdom and His justice. It's not like arbitrary guidance or misguidance of a person.
Who picks and just says, "Oh, I'll misguide him."
It's not like that. It's from Allah's knowledge and His wisdom, and it's based upon a person's actions and his heart. If his heart is wholesome and clean and pure, and he wants to be guidance, he seeks guidance, and he asks Allah and so forth, Allah inshallah will guide that person. But some people have a perversion in their hearts. They don't really sincerely want guidance. They have something else which motivates them. They have aspirations towards the dunya. They have whatever other things. Allah just lets them go in that path. Based upon
guidance. So they're happy with misguidance. That's why.
Yeah. Because that's what they've chosen in the heart. In the heart, that's what they want. Really. Sometimes we might not see people. We might see outwardly people might be religious and whatever. But inside the heart is somewhere else. We don't know that. Allah just misguide them.
Could it be due to a sin that person's committed?
Yeah, it could be sin, could be them, not really wanting the truth, not really wanting to learn the truth. Like a person might spend years and years and years upon ignorance, not learning anything. And then, next thing you know, he becomes like a Sufi or an Ash'ari or whatever. This happens with Salafis as well. Those people who are upon Salafiyah, they spend years and years and years, but they don't learn it, they don't act upon what they learn, they don't implement what they learn. And over time what happens is they become, look at Abu Aliya now, he's like a Sufi. Abu Aliya, like a Sufi, the one in London, he's upon Sufism, yeah. And look at Abu Muntasir, what's he upon? Anything and everything. He's got Sufis, he's got coming to his conference, he's got all sorts. Wrecked, totally wrecked. So just because you know what is Salafiyah, maybe these people sought something else, they were after something else, we don't know what that is. But it just shows that two things: if you don't learn the knowledge and you don't act and implement it in your behaviour, like especially with these people, they didn't implement the Salafi manhaj, issues of methodology and who they keep company with, and cooperation with these groups and things like that. They didn't keep that pure, they didn't implement this knowledge, or maybe they didn't acquire it in the first place. And that shows they're prone to misguidance. It's justified that Allah should misguide them. Right.